Good morning. Today is Friday, September 21st, and this is The Drill. So, thank you very much. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only conservative in the United States of America, the only true conservative, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. Reading things other than current events is of real benefit and real help. One of the things that it does is it helps you to have confidence in yourself. One of the best things that Ayn Rand ever said was that one should trust oneself. Okay, so if you hear somebody say something, whether they're on television, on the radio, or if you read something and something in the back of your mind says, I don't know, this just doesn't seem quite right, then don't dismiss that. Don't dismiss that. Don't say, well, I can't argue with Rush Limbaugh because he's on the radio. I can't argue with a certain columnist because they're published. What do I know? I don't have a master's degree. I haven't been on the radio for 30 years. Ayn Rand is right when she says that doesn't matter. Okay, just because somebody is published, just because somebody is on the air, doesn't mean that they're automatically right. And that if there's something in the back of your mind that is telling you that something's not right, figure out what it is. It might be something trivial. Maybe you're wrong, that there isn't something right, you misunderstood, you didn't hear correctly, or maybe they are wrong. And the classic case of this is the Kavanaugh confirmation, in which you have right now a situation where, of course, the last-minute arbitrary allegation against Mr. Kavanaugh and the Republicans scrambling to accommodate the accuser. The accuser has produced nothing other than her own arbitrary allegation in terms of evidence or proof that Kavanaugh has done anything wrong in any way, shape, or form. And yet the Republicans scramble to go ahead and accommodate her. Oh, we'll put off the vote, which was supposed to be yesterday, and we'll put it off until maybe Monday, and we'll have hearings on Monday, and we'll bring this woman in, and she can talk behind closed doors. She can talk out in the open, however she wants to do it. Now, since the claim is arbitrary, an arbitrary allegation, then all it does is make conservatives look guilty. Okay, I think it's Grassley that is the chairman of the committee, and he just looks like he's a man with a guilty conscience. Okay, and then all these other Republicans, it's amazing how many Republicans are falling right into line and saying, oh, Mr. Grassley is doing the right thing by going ahead and accommodating this woman. And they look like they have equally guilty consciences. Now, what's going on here, and the reason that they're making this big mistake, is they fail to realize what it is that the Democrats are really doing here. They're undermining reality, metaphysical reality. There's several tenets to metaphysical reality. 3, as a matter of fact. 1, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. Number 2, you cannot be in 2 places at the same time. And number 3, you cannot prove a negative. And that's what, in this particular case, the left is trying to get the right to do, to try to prove a negative. Because in so doing, anybody that tries to prove the negative ends up making themselves look bad. They make themselves look guilty of whatever it is that they're being accused of. Okay, and so if they can get enough people, they can undermine reality often enough and get enough people in this country to pretend that reality just doesn't exist, then the rest of it, the takeover of the country politically, is a foregone conclusion. That's easy. They just step in and do it. Okay, so this is another example of the right aiding and abetting the left. And they shouldn't be doing it. They're wrong when they say Grassley's doing a good thing here. No, he isn't. And where they're getting caught up is they're looking at politics. Okay, they keep looking at the election that is looming within 50 some odd days, and that's what they're thinking about. And they have a tendency, the people on the right, to think that politics runs the world. Politics dictates culture. That the culture will follow once you get enough conservatives appointed to office, then the culture will fall into line. Wrong answer. That's not the way things work. That's backwards. It is culture that informs our politics, and they are right now undermining our culture. They are undermining our intellectual state of affairs. And like I said, thereby undermining our culture and setting the country up to go left politically at some point in the future. Now, so as far as the woman and her accusation is concerned, a mere allegation by a person isn't good enough. She comes out and says, he did this. He says, no, I didn't. That's it. That's where it stands. He is off the hook by default because she didn't produce any evidence. All she has to do, and this is for any person who's a victim of anything, is write it down. If you cannot be bothered, because apparently this is, her testimony is to friends of hers, to other witnesses, that she was afraid. She was in a house in which people were drunk and alcohol was being consumed. She didn't want to go home and tell her parents for fear that she would be getting into trouble, getting grounded, or whatnot. So she kept her mouth shut. Fine. I can understand that. So you keep a diary. Lots of girls keep diaries. And that is considered, in court, that's considered very powerful evidence. If you go to a workplace, or you're at a workplace right now, keep a diary. Even if you do it, even if you've been working for the company for 10 years or so, and you haven't kept a diary, do so now. Keep a diary, and in that diary, maybe you can put some past events or whatever, but keep a diary every single day. Sit down and say, "Dear diary, okay, this happened." And everybody should be keeping some sort of a diary anyways, even for their personal lives. And again, why something like this comes up, and I've had it happen to me, where I've had unwanted sexual attention in the workplace, and I have, in a couple of cases, ignored it. In one case, I left a perfectly good job because I knew that there's no way for me to. It was a vice president that was the perpetrator here, vice president of the company. I said, and there was no way I was going to get any type of satisfaction here. There's no way. It was either stick around and continue to allow this butthole to harass me, or quit. Because if I file a complaint, I'm probably just going to get fired. Me as a temporary worker versus a vice president, that's not going to work out very well. Now, if I wanted to go ahead and sue, if I had been keeping a diary, which I hadn't, then I can bring that into court, and that acts as my witness. So it's a very powerful testimony, very powerful documentary evidence. So if she had that, this lady, the accuser, had a diary, and she comes out and says, look, Kavanaugh's not a good guy. He's not qualified to be on the Supreme Court morally and ethically because he tried to rape me when I was 16, 17 years old at a house party, and I wrote it all down in a diary. And then Mr. Grassley says, okay, let's have an investigation. We are prepared to hear your testimony at any time. Bring in a copy of your diary and let us take a look at it, and we'll go from there. Then he's doing the right thing. Then and only then. But if he honors an arbitrary allegation, he is not doing the right thing. He is doing the wrong thing. And he should knock it off. And all the people that are supporting him, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and even Jay Sekulow from the ACLJ, whom I heard last night, again, lionizing Mr. Grassley. Oh, yes, he's doing the right thing. And I wanted to scream at him. I couldn't call him because it was a taped show. It was a show that he had taped from earlier in the day, so I couldn't call him and correct him. But in any case, I wanted to scream at him, no, it's not. And you're a fool for saying so. So, but again, this is the kind of bungling stupidity, because again, these people that are making these mistakes are otherwise intelligent people. Rush Limbaugh's a high school diploma, so that's no big deal. But Jay Sekulow is a lawyer. So he's got a Juris Doctorate degree. He regularly makes briefs in front of the Supreme Court. Okay, and I listen to him on the radio, and you can tell this is a sharp man. He knows what he's doing. But in this particular case, he's blowing it. He is blowing it. He is really harming Republicans. And one of the other ways you can tell that these people are blowing it is the reaction of Democrats. If you ever get to the point where you hit it spot on, and you say exactly the right things or act or respond in exactly the right way, it shuts the left up. They don't know what to do because they're bluffing all the time. They're counting on you reacting or overreacting. When you fail to do so, they don't know what to do. They sit there with a long face, or they'll make faces at you or make a snotty remark. When you have the left, which is what's going on, they are now coming out after Grassley says, hey, we'll do whatever you want, right? Does the left say, well, that's good, excellent, we'll make sure she comes? No. Instead, they say, oh, there's a bunch of old men. Men are supposed to protect women from predators like this. Those kinds of comments. It gets worse. And once their diatribe, their dialogue becomes worse, more you're suffering from more withering invective. It tells you you're doing it wrong. Somewhere you're effing up. Because if you were doing it right, they would be silent. They would have nothing to say. So, and that's what you have to consider, even though you may at first blush think, of course I'm doing it right. And the reason they think they're doing it right, Grassley et al., is because they're looking at this from a political standpoint. If they look deeper into the situation, looked at it philosophically, they would realize and see their mistake and do it right. So, again, I hope that they do it right. They knock it off. They've already made the invitation, but what they can do now to salvage the situation is simply say, look, Monday's the deadline. She's going to testify, or we're going to vote. One of two things. And come out and say, look, there's at this point, no evidence, zero evidence that Mr. Kavanaugh has done anything wrong. Zero. And Monday's the deadline to produce that evidence. And if it has not been produced to our satisfaction, we will be voting on Monday. If she doesn't produce it at all, if she comes in for the hearing, then and at the result of that conclusion of that hearing, there is insufficient evidence to proceed with an investigation, then we will be voting on Tuesday. Okay, that's the way to get back into, to reclaim the situation, so to speak, to salvage the situation. So that's what Grassley needs to do. The pundits, all the pundits need to say that. That's their job. Their job is to say, look, guess what? Grassley's not doing the right thing here. He should quit with this. Set a firm date for the hearing to proceed or for the vote to be taking place, and get on with this. Also, the other issue of this is because everybody's talking about, wow, what's going on in Washington, D.C.? What is Grassley doing? What is this person doing? That person, the other thing. And more attention needs to be paid to what kind of issue is going to be made out of this by your fellow socialists. In other words, the people, you're a conservative, but not everybody around you is conservative. Your family may not be, your friends may not all your friends may be, your coworkers, the people that you see at the store, people you meet at the gym. There's a couple of guys at the gym that are lefties, and I've had four of them. Two of them I've defeated verbally in discussions, arguments, fights, or whatever you want to call it. And there's another two that, again, that I put in check. Well, actually, I've defeated all four when you think about it, because a tie goes to the conservative, because we're not looking to create a movement. Okay, we're not looking to prove anything. Conservatives never, ever have anything to prove, ever. It is always the left that must prove, because it is always the left that wants change. Whoever's asking for change has the burden of proof. In the case of Roe v. Wade, it is the people that want to overturn Roe v. Wade that have the burden of proof. So far, nothing. Now, if someday they come up with a prima facie case for change for Roe v. Wade, then I will go ahead and take their side. I will, and I know how they can do that. Again, they can create the prima facie case for change fairly easily with one medical study that shows that life begins at conception, get it accepted by a court, and I'm on your side. I'm ready to dump Roe v. Wade. But until then, I got to make the presumption for the status quo. That's Roe v. Wade. There's no prima facie case to overturn it. So we stay with that. Okay, so today I want to go with a little bit of Ayn Rand. I might slip some Rush Limbaugh in a little bit of his show, from his little bit of his show yesterday, but maybe not. Most of it was about Kavanaugh, and I've already covered it here in the monologue. But I'm going to read from the Ayn Rand lexicon, also a little bit from the philosophy of House and the philosophy of Breaking Bad. All that when I get back. And thank you. Welcome back. Ayn Rand's the Ayn Rand lexicon. So many words and terms that she's using that, and one of the things that other brilliant things that she's said is very simple: is define your terms. And that's, again, I made the issue a day or two ago about listening. True conservatives listen. They listen to what's being said. And what are you listening for? One of the things you're listening for is definition. One of the classic cases of that is the case of torture. There's always all kinds of debate about torture and whether or not torture should be used. Is it moral, immoral, blah, 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 whether or not this is torture, that is torture, or anything else. And all these discussions are being made without defining what torture is. You have to define it before you can have a debate or a discussion on it. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. Okay? And the definition of torture is, and should be, a person that is inflicting pain deliberately and doing so for psychosexual gratification. And that's an important definition. But in any case, back to Ayn Rand. Today we're at certainty. She's going to give us a definition of certainty. Very important. And you'll, as I read, you'll understand why. Certainty. Certain represents an assessment of the evidence for a conclusion. It is usually contrasted with two other broad types of assessment: possible and probable. Idea X is certain if, in a given context of knowledge, the evidence for X is conclusive. In such a context, all the evidence supports X, and there's no evidence to support any alternative. You cannot challenge a claim to certainty by means of an arbitrary declaration of a counter possibility. You cannot manufacture possibilities without evidence. I'm going to stop real quick right here. And one of the things she's talking about when she says this, and she brings it up in her books, is you'll get from the left the what if scenario. Like you say, well, I'm going to go to my boss, I'm going to ask for a raise. Well, what if he fires you? You know, what if this happens? What if that happens? And they're not asking the question about anything that is certain or even possible or probable. And we know it's not possible or probable because it hasn't happened. Right? So that's the way you handle it when they say, well, what if the boss fires you. The right answer to that is he won't. Okay, because what they're doing here is they're really not arguing with you about your boss and about your situation at work. What they're arguing with you about or trying to do is get you to acknowledge lack of certainty. They want you to say, basically, gee, I don't know. Gee, I guess I'll have to take my chances. Okay, because then you're acknowledging that nothing is certain. Nothing is certain, and that's false. And it's false because the opposite is true. Not only is there certainty of knowledge, there's nothing but. When you know something, you're certain you know it. When you don't know it, you're certain that you don't know it. If you're not sure, you're certain that you're not sure. So, back to Ayn Rand. You cannot challenge a claim to certainty by means of, we already covered that. All the main attacks on certainty depend on evading its contextual character. The alternative is not to feign omniscience, erecting every discovery into an out-of-context absolute, or to embrace skepticism and claim that knowledge is impossible. Both these policies accept omniscience as the standard. The dogmatists pretend to have it. The skeptics bemoan their lack of it. The rational policy is to discard the very notion of omniscience. Knowledge is contextual. It is knowledge. It is knowledge. It is valid contextually. Infallibility is not a precondition of knowing what one does know, of firmness in one's convictions, and of loyalty to one's values. Don't be so sure. Nothing can be certain of anything. Bertrand Russell's gibberish to the contrary notwithstanding, that pronouncement includes itself. Therefore, one cannot be sure that one cannot be sure of anything. The pronouncement means that no knowledge of any kind is possible to man, i.e., that man is not conscious. Furthermore, if one tried to accept that catchphrase, one would find that its second part contradicts its first. If nobody can be certain of anything, then everybody can be certain of everything he pleases, since it cannot be refuted, and he can claim he is not certain, and he can claim he is not certain he is certain, which is the purpose of that notion. So, let me see here. That's the skeptic that says, well, we can't be sure of anything. A couple of things about that real quick. Ayn Rand takes the long way of explaining it, which I suppose is appropriate. However, when you're dealing with a lefty, you don't have that kind of time. You don't want to sit here and memorize that whole statement. There's just no, you're standing in the line at the grocery store, and Mr. Lefty, who's behind you, strikes up a conversation and then hits you with nobody can be certain of anything. Okay? You don't have to go into this whole diatribe. The simplest and correct answer is to simply say, are you sure? Okay? Because when he says, well, nobody can really be certain of anything, he's making a statement of certainty. Okay, so to remind him of that, you just ask him, are you sure? And it'll shut him up. There's nowhere to go after that. So, and then what this does, the non-certainty thing, is it creates the whole world becomes a criminal. We end up becoming a criminal society, and what I mean by that is that skepticism breeds. It further victimizes victims. And again, I've discussed this in other broadcasts. Bill Cosby, right? We grow up, and in our culture, you've heard it over, I don't know how many dozens of times. One can't be certain of anything. Well, you can't be sure. People get mad if you say, well, this is the way it is. No, you can't be sure of that. So we hear you get punished. You display certainty, you get punished. You get punished in the classroom, you get punished on the playgrounds, you get punished at work, you get punished all over the place for daring to acknowledge reality, basically is what it is. So you grow up in that kind of certainty, in that kind of an environment, and what do? You quit making statements of certainty. You'll hear a lot of people, especially if you're listening to the radio, that say, in my opinion. They will qualify every damn thing they say, right? You can hear it. Listen to the radio, listen to a talk show, and you'll hear it. You'll hear the host do it. You'll hear the callers do it, right? And it's crap, but they do it because they've all been brainwashed to do this. Now, here you are. You go to Bill Cosby. You're a woman. You go to Bill Cosby. You go to his house, and Bill Cosby says, hey, I'm going to help you with your acting. And one of the things you need to do is you need to relax. So he gives you something. Either he gives you something or he slips something into your drink. Better yet, let's just say he slips something into your drink, right? So you have your drink and you're talking to him, and then the next thing you know, you're waking up. You're disheveled. There's all kinds of signs that you are certain that you've been raped and or sexually molested. He's in a bathrobe, etc., etc. But, what do? You've been raised your whole life being told that nothing is certain. What do? Because you immediately you're thinking, I got to go to the police. I got to report this. I've been violated. Okay, you have, but there's that terror, the absolute terror of knowing that nobody's gonna listen. They're not gonna listen. You're gonna go to the police station. You're gonna say, Bill Cosby raped me. And what is the policeman gonna ask you? How do you know? And if you've been raised, you've gone through your whole life and had all of society hammering you, pushing you, every time you express certainty, what do you think is going to happen now? That's right. You're fucked. Twice. Once by Bill Cosby, and the second time by our society. So, what do? Nothing. Nothing. Until 20, 30, 40 years later, when somebody has the courage, the guts to come out and say something publicly against Bill Cosby, then you're able to, you have the comfort of numbers. So you watch this person come out, second person, the third person, and you realize, wow, nobody can argue. They might be able to tell one person you don't know or nothing can be known, but they cannot shut up 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 people or more. So that's when it finally comes out. Years later, when the statute of limitations is passed, and it's much more difficult, if not impossible, to get justice. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so that's the end of that particular entry on certainty. So again, very important for the reasons I've already mentioned. And so when I come back, it's going to be maybe some Rush Limbaugh, but if not, definitely philosophy according to House and the philosophy of Breaking Bad. Thank you very much, and welcome back. It is going to be, I am going to go ahead and do a brief little thing on Rush Limbaugh, and it is from his show yesterday, and a segment called O'Keefe Exposes Communists in the Deep State. So James O'Keefe is at something called Project Veritas, and they basically go to they've gone to Planned Parenthood, for example, and they bring hidden cameras. They get themselves inserted in various places and usually dealing with the left and record them, ask them questions about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and then simply record it. And then go ahead and make those recordings public, usually one at a time. They dole it out little by little. So this is a segment on their latest exploits. Rush, James O'Keefe at Project Veritas, is continuing to really do important work exposing the deep state. In this case, exposing liberalism and liberals where they are hiding and getting them to admit their activism and corruption. And this has been a months-long project, the latest reveal, and it's been totally covered up by the Blasey story, the Kavanaugh story. So I want to spend just a few moments because O'Keefe and Project Veritas, they really need encouragement and a bunch of attaboys because there's nobody else doing what they do. And it's, as such, irreplaceable. I want to recognize them for all the hard work they do. It's pretty risky. In fact, it is the kind of 60 Minutes type of journalism, but aimed at the left. 60 Minutes with their hidden cameras and this kind of stuff from decades ago, trying to expose fraud wherever they found it. None of that ever happens aimed at the Democrats or the left, and so O'Keefe and his group have exposed Acorn, blew Acorn up, the Obama Community Organizing Group. Okay, break transcript. Rush to the Project Veritas videos. Here is the Deep State Unmasked. Let me see what we got here. We got a little bit of video. Let's see if I can get any audio out of this. It's 13 minutes. I'm not going to play the whole thing, so. Reads Project Veritas. Let's see what we got here.
Everything I'm doing with ESA is stuff I'm not supposed to be doing for work. So, what do you mean? It's explicitly prohibited. So, if they find out, I could get in trouble, basically. If you're in an executive branch agency, you can slow ball things to a degree that it's ineffective, and maybe you get in trouble, and maybe you get fired or you resign or whatever. But you slow them down for a certain period of time.
Okay, so let's stop that right there, because like I said, I'm not going to go on for 13 minutes. It's enough to make my point, and I'm not going to go ahead and continue with the rest of the segment here because it's already made my point. The point is that the left likes they like to play secret squirrel. Okay, they like decoder rings. They like engage in secret things. They like I'm trying to remember what the words that I'm looking for here. Dog whistle is one. You hear the lefts all the time say, "Well, it's a dog whistle for such and such," or they love code words and dog whistles. Okay, they use them themselves and they assume everyone else does so as well. But what they really love to do is create myths. Okay, so the deep state is a left-wing myth. There is no such thing. It doesn't exist. But it's useful myth in that it keeps people on the right, the Rush Limbaughs of the world, occupied, keeps them spinning. It keeps them wasting time on something that just doesn't exist. Now, you've heard a little bit of a clip of their videotape. It shows this particular individual, I don't know who it was, supposedly from, I think it was the Department of Justice, either Department of Justice or the Department of State, probably Department of State, and saying that basically that he can, that people in the executive branch can slow things down. Okay, maybe you get in trouble, maybe you don't, or whatever. Well, what does this prove? This proves the existence of a deep state, one person speculating about what somebody in the executive branch could do. Doesn't prove anything, but it's a good boogeyman. It's a great thing if you're a talk show host and you want to get people to tune in to your show. You can always bring up the boogeyman of the deep state. Oh, today we're going to expose the deep state. And I'm sure his ratings probably went through the roof. Not only that, but it's great for the Republican National Committee, whose main job is to raise funds. If you have Rush Limbaugh out exposing the deep state, the RNC then sends out letters to its donors saying, "Oh, you've got to give us money because the deep state is being unmasked, and these deep state people are defying Donald Trump and trying to interfere with with truth, justice, and the American way." That kind of thing. So it's a good fundraising situation. That's the other thing with what's been going on with the hearings about what's going on in the Department of Justice. And there's documents that were supposed to be turned over to this congressional committee. It hasn't been done. And the congressional committee could have acted months ago to get those documents, and it hasn't been done. Donald Trump could have gone ahead and made sure those documents were released months ago, and it didn't happen. And it didn't happen, I believe, because of political theater. Again, because the RNC and Republicans want to milk this scandal for all it's worth. Get as much money out of it and as many votes out of it as they possibly can. So that's the whole purpose. That's one of the things, too, with the deep state is I'm sure there's a lot of Republicans on the Hill in Washington that know that the deep state is a myth. But it's a useful myth. It's something that they can use to raise funds. And it's useful myth for the left for the same reasons. And they can use it also for raising funds, and also they can use it to keep people like Rush Limbaugh going in circles and wasting their time on things that are irrelevant. So when I come back, I'm going to be reading from the Philosophy According to House. Thank you very much. So this part of the chapter is called the double standard. There's a double standard operating in each episode of House, as House is tolerated as an exception to hospital rules and regulations. This fits nicely with Nietzsche's conception of the Overman. Nietzsche, wanted to make room for an aristocratic morality designed for exceptions, and he sought to undermine the idea that there is one type of morality for all individuals, one dictatorial morality that prescribes how all humans ought to live. Believing House is somehow special, his colleagues enable and defend him despite his many violations of custom, tradition, and the law. We've seen House forge prescriptions, lie to almost everyone, and violate drug laws. But curiously, House doesn't justify his own behavior by appealing to his achievements and thus his value to others. It isn't a matter of self-entitlement. House is simply indifferent to confining rules, and if circumstances dictate, he acts as if the regulations did not exist. And again, what he's really doing, and what the show is doing, is saying that might makes right, and the ends justify the means. These shows are always careful to throw a little determinism in there. So this way that the bag of guilt doesn't fall squarely on the shoulders of the main character, in this case, House. And they create a deterministic environment for House by making him a cripple, that he'd had an infarction in his thigh muscle, and that creates a constant pain, and therefore he has to be on medication. And also that's kind of blamed for everything that he does. That's what's lurking in the background here. It's not as though he is really making a free will kind of decision or choices. The suggestion here is that if he wasn't in pain, if he wasn't on medication, that he wouldn't be acting the way he is. He would be a more moral person. But he can't help himself. Circumstances, powers beyond his control have forced him to act the way he does, and that's crap. It's wrong. Infarction or not, he has the ability, he has the free will to decide what he's going to do and how he's going to do it. So, let's see. House's style. There's a definite aesthetic dimension in Nietzsche's work. And the artist is perhaps the best example of the Overman. For the artist, creation is overcoming. However, the artist can become the artwork as the Overman makes his own life a work of art. Nietzsche emphasized giving style to one's character as the substance of an outstanding life. The obvious prominence of style in the character of Dr. House leaves others at his hospital, which, for all their diversity, dress and speak in the same tentative modes, pale or sterile by comparison. Their range of emotional expressions and attempts at humor are nearly non-existent when considered alongside House's adolescent antics and cutting words. The stylistic pluralism of Nietzsche's writings is reflected in his contention that one can mold one's own life in accord with a number of different but distinct styles. Style is a complex and elusive matter, changing with change in context. That Gregory House doesn't dress, speak, or have the manners of a good hospital doctor is the most obvious mark of House. As a dramatic device, the strong style of House creates a constant tension between himself and the other characters while soliciting ambiguous admiration from the viewers. An aura of House's style serves as a visual and auditory symbol of this value, that he is defended and tolerated despite his appearance. We envy House for the unpretentious way he speaks his mind and for his guilt-free attitude in pushing across his own beliefs and desires. Nietzsche's Overman is superior in the sense that he does not reference the world to determine who he is. Like House, the Overman constructs his own identity. Hence, identity politics, which is crap as well. And you got to remember, with Nietzsche is a classic example of somebody that can be intimidating. You read a book that he wrote, Thus Spake Zarathustra, or any of the others, and you're intimidated. And you're intimidated because he is a published author. And you think to yourself, well, none of this stuff makes a whole lot of sense that he's saying. And a lot of the stuff is simply contradictory and wrong. But who am I to say? I'm not a published author. And there's all these other critics out there that say that Nietzsche is a great guy, that he has a lot to offer in his works, that he's a great philosopher, which is not true. He was a philologist and a novelist. Okay, that's what he was. So if they can't even get that straight, then how can they be trusted to critique the books properly? So, yes, so don't be intimidated by Nietzsche, don't be intimidated by Hegel, don't be intimidated by anybody. If somebody's right, they're right. If they're wrong, no matter who they are. And that bears reminding. And then the upshot of this little particular segment here is basically, again, what they're saying about the hypocrisy. House is allowed to do whatever he wants. Everybody else is expected to toe the line. It's kind of hypocrisy you see a lot in life. Let's say on a football team, where the star quarterback who is helping the team win and generates a lot of revenue for the team is allowed to get away with things that other people on the team couldn't get away with. If he doesn't show up for practice, the coach is just going to kind of shrug his shoulders, roll his eyes, but keep going. If a second string lineman decides not to show up for practice, he gets suspended for 2 or 3 games or worse. So House is somebody that works he's in the hospital and he's of a value to the hospital. He saves people's lives. He is instrumental in being a great diagnostician, and I suppose in other ways. So the hospital is willing to overlook his poor aesthetics as well as his poor attitude. So, when we come back, it's going to be the philosophy and Breaking Bad. Thank you very much. And let's see. Responsible for Jane's death. Okay, so that was... Oh, darn, that's right. Okay, well, we're not going to be able to do this one. So, at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and conclude the show and say that this concludes another episode of The Drill. And I thank you for listening. And until next time, have a great day.